The County of San Diego is taking an administrative action by declaring both a local emergency and a public health emergency.
When COVID hit, we went right to our partners that were there with us. We knew we had to figure this out together.
The questions came flooding in. While things were absolutely chaotic, we knew where to go for answers, which is a huge stabilizing force.
We had an immediate way to be able to communicate with residents, with organizations, and with the community. Live Well San Diego started with 4 original sectors. And then through this pandemic response, we were able to expand it to 9 sectors and 12 subsectors, all with the intent of being able to tailor the information and the messaging that we were providing.
That partnership with the county, with Live Well, with Dr. Wooten's office was so critical in making sure that we were aligned in our thinking, same messaging, and it was incredibly beneficial to everyone.
We have each other, I think, on speed dial. And so if there's a question, they've always availed themselves to answer those questions. If they don't have the right answers, they know who to go to in the county to get the information.
You know, so many of us are lost in this because we're not trained scientists, we're not trained epidemiologists, infectious disease experts. So we trust those that we consider a part of our team that the county extends to us, and it's been a wonderful service.
We knew where to go. We knew where to find people. Our members knew that they could count on us to get those answers, and we knew that we could count on the county to be as helpful as they could possibly be, because they were also learning on the fly.
Hey, my name is Storm Lever. It is nice to make your acquaintance.
We had it from trusted messengers help us deliver that information so we could actually take it, and now we could make it culturally appropriate for the population that we were targeting.
There's a sense of urgency and just a can-do spirit. It's not, we can't do this because, it's what is it going to take to make it happen?
So we had the pipeline to the county. We got flyers and we got handouts that we could take and tailor it for our specific ethnic group, and we could hand it out to people while we were engaging them.
This was a groundswell with our Live Well partners and others that came together and said, how do we look at our communities that are more adversely impacted? And so one of the very first things we also developed was a health equity task force.
So here we have our county team of subject matter experts.
We could not have done any of this without the support and partnership of the county. And this not only extends through Health and Human Services, Nick Macchione, Milma Wooten, Board of Supervisors. Extraordinary to have those relationships and partnership.
They must have worked 14, 15, 17-hour days, just because our businesses don't only exist between 9 and 5. Some of them exist mostly at night, or they have a 24-hour operation, and questions would come up at 3 in the morning.
I've actually had community health workers out in the field who call and ask a question. And I said, hold on just a second. We've actually been able to turn it around real time.
What's wonderful about our partnership with the county is it's always one step ahead of us.
So the Live Well partnership is one that I've watched really grow, transform, and meet the moment, and I'm really proud of it.
What's exciting is those partnerships don't come and then go. They stay. And I think the importance of really addressing people who are still struggling, rebuilding the economy that was reversely impacted, it's our partners that are shoulder to shoulder with us that are going to do that forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I am so pleased to welcome you all here for the closing plenary of this conference. That video highlighted a perfect theme for this final session, which is about collective impact and action. My name is Shalini Vajhala. I'm the Executive Director of the San Diego Regional Policy and Innovation Center. We are a new nonprofit established in partnership between the county and the San Diego Foundation. And our mission is to develop, test, and implement world-class evidence-based policy solutions to problems in the region, some of our biggest challenges. And I've been describing our work as being focused on the things that are everybody's problem, but no one's specific job. So things like sea level rise and fire risk. And we have a fantastic panel here today to talk to you about all the ways in which the Policy and Innovation Center is working collaboratively across the region on a wide range of challenges. And so I'm going to start by introducing our panelists. I want to thank each of them for being here. And I'm just going to provide brief one-sentence introductions of each one because we have such an esteemed group that the best way for you to all meet them is to hear from them directly. So let me introduce quickly. We have Mark Stuart here. Mark, please say hello. There we go. Who's the president and CEO of the San Diego Foundation. Under his leadership, the San Diego Foundation has grown to over $1 billion in assets. And last year, they distributed a record $104 million through nearly 7,000 grants to the 2,000 nonprofits that serve San Diegans in need. Next, we have Nick Macchione, who serves as San Diego County's Director of Health and Human Services. He directs a professional workforce of 6,200 employees with a $2 billion annual operating budget. And this is one of the largest health and human services networks in the nation. Following Nick, we have Sarah Aghassi, who is the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer and General Manager for the County Land Use and Environment Group, LUGE. Sarah's portfolio is as sprawling as Nick's. Between them, they cover a huge range of issues across the county, and Sarah leads a team of almost 2,000 people to marshal the county's efforts in environmental conservation, land use planning, safety, consumer and public health protection, economic development, infrastructure, and maintenance. And last but not least, we have Jamal Russell Black, who is the Senior Officer for Analytics and Impact at the San Diego Regional Policy and Innovation Center, and an expert in data-driven analysis and geospatial research. So previously, Jamal worked with a set of Fortune 100 companies on everything from decarbonization and climate action to supporting an equitable green transition. Thank you all for being here. I could not be more excited about the breadth of expertise that each of you bring to this concept of collective impact and how we operationalize that in a county that is larger than 20 states in the country. So I'd like to start with the same question for each of you, and I'll pass the mic to you in turn. But my question to all four of you is giving you each a couple minutes to respond. Each of you have had a different role in the creation and the formation and the launch of the Policy and Innovation Center. And from your perspective, I'd like you to speak a little bit to how this center is a vehicle for collective impact and what success looks like from your respective positions. So Mark, can I start with you, please?
Sure, Shalini, thank you for that introduction. So in times of great emergency, community foundations are uniquely positioned to put our deep cross-sector relationships to work for those most in need. COVID-19 revealed some of our greatest structural challenges: health risks, economic instability, and of course, inequity of opportunity. The foundation has played and continues to play an instrumental role in our region's COVID-19 response, but we recognize that relief is short-term and a robust, equitable recovery will require us to address major structural problems. The San Diego Regional Policy and Innovation Center is our response to the need for integrated, collaborative policy solutions to enable transformational systems change. Through the center's partnership with the Brookings Institution, the world's leading policy think tank, my hope is that we'll be able to expand our partnerships, identify catalytic policies, programs, and interventions, and most importantly, attract greater capital to the region than we ever have before.
Thank you, Mark. That was great. Nick, over to you, please.
Yeah, there's an expression that to go fast, go alone, to go far, go together. And I think what's exciting for me about the center already is how it's really brought all of our partners, our county government, our other civic leaders, our nonprofit, our philanthropic leaders like Mark and others coming together, choosing to come together. And very importantly, right, in the title of itself, the Innovation Center, to innovate forward. If there was ever a time we needed to proactively think about the road to recovery as a result of COVID-19, it's now. And so making sure that we truly engage, we just don't consult, but collaborate with all members of our society in San Diego, which is quite large, in a way that we can capture these great ideas coming together. And then very importantly, taking action on that is something that it's going to really have immense benefits in helping San Diegans live well into the future.
I love that, Nick. The going far together and making sure that we collaborate and don't consult is a key piece of our vision for the center's operations in the region. Sarah, what does success look like from your perspective?
Thanks so much. It's great to be with all of you today. Just building on what Mark and Nick were mentioning, I think it's really about the collective impact, because the issues that we're tackling throughout the region, they can be daunting if you're looking at it through a single lens of government or business or nonprofits or private sector. And really the SDR PIC provides that opportunity for all of us to come together and not work in silos, but also to really think about what are those steps that should be taken to use evidence-based, data-driven options, and then to come up with a path forward in working with our partners and collaborating. And it's just very exciting to be able to have this sort of forum. I mean, growing up within the region, this is what we have been missing, frankly, as it relates to really being able to bring together all of our sectors to tackle those largest issues facing our region and society. So it's absolutely exciting and looking forward to rolling up our sleeves and tackling those issues.
That's fantastic. Jamal, over to you. From within the center, how do you see collective impact in your portfolio?
Yeah, so the mission of the Policy and Innovation Center is to develop and test and implement kind of world-class research and policy-driven solutions to both address our region's most pressing challenges, to address our region's most pressing challenges. And we use applied research to really help local leaders identify policies and programs and interventions and attract greater capital to the region. The question then becomes, what does this look like? And climate resilience and infrastructure, build outs like broadband access and homelessness and housing affordability. These are all regional challenges that require like a massive collective effort. And I think success from my perspective looks at leveraging a data-driven approach to both inform growth opportunities as well as stimulating this equitable green transition, and then embedding these lessons learned to the benefits of all San Diegans.
That's wonderful. I think what I'd like to do with each of you to really translate this conversation into a forum that touches all the different areas of collective impact is to walk through a set of questions with you on really the pillars of what defines effective collective action. That, Nick, exactly what you said. How do we collaborate toward a better outcome and not just consult about a problem? And so the first question I'd really like to start with is the first pillar of collective action. How do you get everyone together around a common agenda and establish what exactly is the need, the problem we're trying to solve, and building consensus around the solution? So, Sarah, I'd like to start with you because your portfolio, land use and environment, touches everything. And can you speak a little bit about how your team thinks about building a common agenda around such a sprawling set of topics and really breaking it down into manageable chunks?
Sure. The first thing that we have to do is come to some sort of an agreement on what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And in order to be able to do that, we really need to have all of those interested community members, stakeholders at the table to talk about the problem and to establish that common environment and comfortable environment in which I like to say we can get uncomfortable, where we can push each other and have those honest conversations to come to that agreement on here is the problem that we need to solve. Because without that, we can have a very narrow perspective on what the problem might be. But once you establish that venue to have those conversations, then that next step becomes about now, what are we going to do about it? And then how do we have that shared vision of how we're going to move forward in solving that issue and to come to those outcomes that Nick was highlighting. So that, and I think it's a very exciting because it can be really growth opportunity for all of us when we come around the table and have those conversations to be able to see it through the lens of other stakeholders and community members who may be able to point out other aspects for us.
That's perfect. And I think so much of a common agenda is really about laying the groundwork for collective problem solving. And Nick, that has been what you have been doing for now more than 18 months as your portfolio has just taken on a whole new set of dimensions with the pandemic. And health and human services have been at the top of everyone's minds. Can you speak a little bit to how the county has approached building a common understanding of such a broad and novel problem and really galvanizing stakeholders in the region around shared action and public health?
Thank you. That's a great question. We saw the opening video of what we went through as our community in San Diego. And a key antidote to any pandemic, the current and to future, is population health. Population health that's grounded in true public engagement and public trust. And we went hard at work in building a equity-driven ecosystem that involved from neighbors and regular citizens and San Diegans to organizations and collaborations and coalitions. And we made the conversation about that this was about us, not about me or you or they, but us. And when we achieved really that targeted universalism around COVID is when we then activated our Live Well sectors. And that was discussed about our many partners, all of you that are listening and others, in a way that got us very clear that from the initial stages of what we knew of how to protect ourselves and our loved ones, our neighbors around COVID, to then the knowledge around testing and to obviously to the vaccinations. We have used and are using what we have learned from COVID now in our focus around homelessness and child abuse and dealing with poverty. And if we could use that same approach we did with COVID and the mobilization of our community and building the trust and the true collaboration and moving into that generative state as a result of that collaboration is where we're really focusing right now. And so very excited about where we go forward from here as we're helping, be it our homeless, our elders, our children, and our families.
That's such an important piece of all this, of not letting a crisis go to waste. And I think it's reflected in all of your remarks to this point. And it brings us to a really important second pillar of collective impact when you bring this down to action, which is, how do you know you're succeeding? It's about shared measurement. And in public health, very much like climate change, right? Success sometimes is something that doesn't happen, right? There was a pandemic, but the community was protected. You do have storms or fires, but the community is protected. In order to know where you're succeeding in this space, data is an incredibly important thing. And it's especially important for these issues where you're focused on overall well-being, which isn't a finish line. You're never done. Someone is never healthy enough. And so I think I want to transition to Jamal. You just heard Nick hammer home, all the important elements of really being proactive about tackling problems as broad as public health. And as a self-described data geek, which I share, can you talk a little bit about the role of measurement and shared measurement in driving the agenda to solve these kinds of problems?
Yeah, absolutely. Data, when appropriately used, has the power to inspire progress and galvanize change. It can provide a deeper understanding and help contextualize our world. And to arrive at the place where we want to be as a society, both within San Diego and outside of the region and globally, we must first know where we have been and where we currently are. And without data, we cannot fully understand, for example, the effects of climate change on our world, Without data, we are ignorant to the full breadth of the historical injustices and inequalities that still impact us today. And without data, the policies and programs and solutions that we propose and implement are at a high risk of missing the mark of their respective objectives. It's not that qualitative and anecdotal evidence is not powerful. And in fact, the narrative surrounding societal ills and societal ills has historically been and often still is the catalyst for or against change. A strength of storytelling is connecting to the audience in a way that's often much harder to relate to while using data-driven methods. Nonetheless, quantitative approaches and measuring kind of both the baseline, the ongoing success or failures of a program, and evaluating kind of where we still need to go is something that only data can really provide us. And so, the quantitative and qualitative approaches should be really viewed as a complementary to one another.
Jamal, one of the things I love about our work together in the center is the ways in which we can tackle problems that have been framed in kind of unsolvable ways to start and shift how you ask the question to get to different solutions. So one of the examples within the center that I am most excited about is really, Nick, going to your point about not letting the crisis go to waste, right? And going far together is we've had a great reveal through this pandemic when it comes to data, right? So before COVID-19, people struggled to afford their water and their electricity bills. That was not something brought on by a health crisis, but it was something revealed by. And now we actually have information about where people have been receiving subsidies, where they've been struggling most that can let us target interventions in ways that weren't possible before. We wouldn't have necessarily known who to reach and how. And so that's the kind of thing that I think sitting in the Policy and Innovation Center, we can actually zoom out and look at problems from a new way at a regional level. And our hope is using data on utility bill relief that we can actually help drive investments in the county to improving energy efficiency, water efficiency for those folks who would have never been able to get access to those resources before. And then collectively advance regional sustainability. So that story arc from the little teeny tiny pieces of what people normally think about as data, I think is an incredibly important piece of what Live Well does in establishing these indicators, helping us know where we've made progress. So I want to stay on this theme of shared measurement and data and pass it to Sarah and then Nick in order on the work that you both have done and what the county has done to establish a new data office. This was a really visionary move, and I know it has different implications for each of your portfolios. Sarah, can you speak to why you did this and what your hopes are?
Absolutely. I mean, data is at the heart of everything that we need to accomplish. And in order for us to be able to have the progress within the communities and to have that positive impact, we have to know our communities. We have to be able to assess the needs, and the needs can be different from one census tract to the next. So it could be neighboring communities, but if we don't have the information, and the first step is to have the information. The second is, what are we going to use the information for? And why are we collecting the data? And so as we do that, across the board for purposes of our departments, having the information is critical in decision-making on where we're going to invest and where we need to make progress so that we have those positive outcomes. It can be as simple as, where do we have foodborne illnesses? And are there common themes for that so that we're protecting the public health as it relates to the interactions that we're having with our community members? It can be, what languages are we sharing our information in? Because if we're not seeing certain compliance or certain progress, could it be that there are language barriers? Mm-hmm. All of those aspects become so important to us. Or where are we putting air quality monitors within our communities to see from an environmental justice perspective where are those impacts? And then it can be large policy decision making as well. So when we look at our regional decarbonization framework and really being able to assess how will we have that just transition as it relates to the workforce of the future, what are the jobs that we will need to have? But then how do we train and prepare for those needs into the future? So I could go on and on about the ways in which we really need to use the information. But it's really exciting to have an office that can focus on that, to see what are the needs in the community, what are we doing within our organization, and where should we focus our emphasis when it comes to certain programs and services so that we have those additional positive outcomes within the community itself.
I love that answer. It's so much about making information useful, not just pointing a fire hose at an issue. And Nick, I suspect that dominates everything you do. So I want to turn it to you.
I'm reminded in the early days of the COVID pandemic in 2010, 2020, when we were just inundated, tsunamied with data, all types of data. Yet when we were talking with our LiveWell partners, when we were hearing through all of our sectors, yes, it was data, but more it was what Jamal was talking about. It was about stories. It was about how it was impacting them. And so building a data office is symbolic of a much broader, deeper work of understanding our data, or I like to say how we harmonize data to humanize action. And this office allows really to be this convener, in many cases, helping us collect the data, but think about, and as Sarah talked about, and what does this really mean? And how do we translate it into action and improving and helping San Diegans live well? This has been illustrated with our Live Well partners. One of the things about Live Well San Diego, many things I'm proud of, is around data, around shared measurements. We developed Live Well indicators. When we came together in this little group huddle for the County of San Diego at the beginning with hundreds of our partners, now many more than that, over 500. But when we began, we said we needed a way to understand how we're making impacts, how we're really harmonizing the collective work and translating that into humanizing action and improvement. And so the Live Well indicators allowed us to kind of see how we're progressing. And we started with one around preventable deaths. We call it 3 for 50. Actually started here in San Diego, and it's been now used throughout many parts of the country. But actually, it's a World Health Organization definition, and it says that's 3 behaviors that lead to 4 chronic conditions that can lead to over 50% of all deaths. And when we looked at these 3 behaviors, these 4 chronic conditions, it was really important to talk about where we were. And we were at 3, 4, 57. 57% of all preventable deaths were related to those 4 chronic diseases. And those lifestyles was not having proper nutrition, not exercising, and not getting involved with cigarette smoking and drugs. I'm proud to say in just over 10 years, we saw a remarkable improvement where most of the country is still showing rises in preventable deaths. San Diego showed a 12% reduction in preventable deaths. Thousands and thousands of San Diegans alive and thriving today as a result of shared measurements of the contributions that all the Live Well partners, not the County of San Diego, but all the partners are making, including San Diegans themselves. So the power of data is critical in our work of really improving life expectancy and quality of life.
I so appreciate how you took something abstract and made it right down to an individual person. And I think this is such an important part of our work in the center, is solving big structural problems or the underlying social determinants of health individually and regionally. And a lot of that depends on not just using data well, it's also knowing what we don't have and what we need to look for. So really understanding those gaps. I think this brings us to the third pillar here of collective impact and successful collective impact in action, which is looking across issues. People are complicated. Regions are even more complicated, right? So Health is not based on one thing. Nick, you described the 3x4 set of things that you need to look for. Mark, one of the things I appreciate most about the work of the San Diego Foundation is how the foundation really has been investing in these, in the weaving of these different types of activities and lifting up organizations that are doing things that are cross-cutting. And I'd love if you could speak a little bit to the foundation's strategic plan and how it connects things in a way that reveals where we might need more data or a different approach to problem solving.
Sure, Shalini. What I'd like to do is start with an example connected to a recent collaboration that we've initiated and have now expanded, but it's the Blue-Green Hub that the Policy and Innovation Center team helped bring together to support local fishermen and build up our regional coastal resiliency. In July 2020, we provided a grant of $55,000 to the San Diego Fishermen's Working Group through our COVID-19 Community Response Fund to support a pilot program connecting healthy, fresh seafood sources to local nonprofits and food banks. This grant not only helped support local fishermen whose livelihoods and incomes were dramatically disrupted by restaurant shutdowns and tourism declines, it also created a new market pathway for local fishermen to provide seafood-based meals for food insecure residents of the region. This type of cross-cutting investment, where we can support two different types of communities with a coordinated investment, embodies a mutually reinforcing activity. This whole concept is core to our strategic plan and our vision for improving equity of opportunity for everyone in the region. This kind of cross-cutting forward thinking is what we need more broadly to scale these types of investments in our local industries and improve food security, equity, and affordability over the long term. This proposal embodies the philosophy of building back better and has the potential to be truly transformational. Our work with the county to launch the Policy and Innovation Center takes this idea to a whole new level.
That's fantastic. Mark, I love that that example connects Sarah's comments on food safety and large-scale land use and agriculture to Nick, what you said about nutrition and the social determinants of health and risk of mortality at a very, very fundamental level. And these kinds of cross-cutting opportunities and investments are things that are there if you look for them. But it really takes a community like the Live Well community, where folks are talking, are engaged with one another, and speaking enough of a common language across different fields, from building and trades all the way out to health and medical professions. And I think that's one of the most incredible things about this community, what Live Well represents. And so I want to turn it to Jamal on the theme of continuous communication, because I think this is an incredibly important, but also complicated piece of collective impact. Oftentimes we can substitute communication for action. And I think, Nick, I loved your phrase early on about consulting versus collaboration. Continuous communication is incredibly important. We need to be speaking the same language in order to be able to connect these things and find those opportunities to support fishermen and folks who are struggling to get their next meal. That's a way of making sure that we can actually meet multiple needs with the same investment. Being able to see that means that you have to be talking to both of those sets of folks. So Jamal, can you speak a little bit to how you think about going from vision to designing new projects and programs to building things on the ground? I think about this like a relay race that we are running together at the center here, where you have to be ready to both pass and receive a baton at the right moments. And can you connect how your earlier remarks about data and measurement were so powerful? I think this all threads together. Turn data into this type of conversation.
Yeah. So for me, data is really, really good at explaining the what of a problem or where we are as a society, but it's not always as good at explaining the why or the how. And so quickly turning back to one of the 3-4-50 program Nick highlighted, data really did a good job probably in helping, this is before my time, but helping the policymakers kind of create a program that would address, or first identify kind of the needs of society, and then creating a program that would then address this larger problem. Data did a really good job in this role, I imagine. However, I would posit that without strong communication, that strong continuous communication, both to the community more broadly and within different policy organizations and public entities, we would not have seen the same level of success in that program. And potentially this could have resulted in thousands of additional deaths. I think similarly, when we address something like unemployment, continuous communication is something that's going to be really, really important. And so it's easy for someone like myself to, look at the data and delve deeply into what's kind of happening on, at the region more broadly, and then kind of looking at pockets of unemployment and seeing how that's been affected both prior to, during, and then after the pandemic. But to address those issues and to address the unemployment disparities that we see in society, what's really going to be needed is constant communication, both again within the population, because they oftentimes have proven that they'll know exactly what they need as far as support is concerned. So having that open line of communication with those populations, the organizations that are working within and with those populations is going to be really important. And then again, working with public entities, government, to make sure that whatever the programs and policies that we are creating to address those are going to be, crafted in a way that helps to stimulate the change that we're looking for. And I think that this would also additionally help, the crafting of policy in this way, this constant communication helps in trust building, which will then help kind of reinforce the success of the policy more broadly. These communities with the greatest needs are often at a disadvantage when accessing things like resources. And so constant communication can help ensure that this doesn't happen. And this is what we are really trying to do here at the Policy and Innovation Center.
You use such an important word, Jamal, which is trust. And information on its own does not solve problems. In many ways, it can actually reduce trust if you bludgeon folks with technical reports on things that they know better about their own lives. And so, Nick, I'm going to pass it back to you here, because I think there's been an ongoing dialogue around the county here about how to make information relevant and trustworthy and useful. And we saw that in the videos. But can you speak a little bit to this and how you think about maintaining that trust over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when we were in the throes of the pandemic and still are in the pandemic, but really at the peak levels, the importance of connecting with our residents in a meaningful, trustful way opened our eyes to where it was flowing and areas that were not. I think of in South Bay, there was at the start of the pandemic, we had a great amount of distrust, lots of factors and reasons for it, but we still needed to connect and communicate with our public. And so it was our Live Well partners who said, the way we connect is by making sure we're reflective of the community, communicating back, neighbor to neighbor. That actually led to the creation of the Promotora model, which is a layperson approach, community leaders and members that we were able to give our knowledge and data requirements and how then they translate it ethnically, linguistically, culturally to connecting with people about how to protect themselves from COVID and what to do and where to get help. And that was extremely important when we were trying to get folks tested and clearly when we got into the vaccination period. That approach about making sure we were not just government to community, but partners in government with community and serving community has really changed our entire approach going forward across all of our programs, not just public health, but in behavioral health and child welfare and aging programs. And fair to say, other county programs across the board. So I can't underscore the criticality of making sure that it is the community with you communicating and understanding how to touch the lives of folks that they live in neighborhoods with.
That's the notion of not just a trusted message, but a trusted messenger is so important for issues that are even bigger and longer term than many of the public health examples that you gave, Nick. And Sarah, when I think about your portfolio, it goes for everything from talking to farmers to large scale industrial operators about things that are important yesterday and tomorrow and things that are going to be important 20 years from now. So when you think about continuous communication, this kind of trusted message and trusted messenger is something that the Policy and Innovation Center is really striving to be part of that chain of communication. How do you see all these dots connecting in your portfolio?
It's really trust is earned every day. And that's something that we talk about continuously. Really, the way that we have to approach it, regardless of the issue, is how do we ensure that we're taking into consideration the community that's being impacted and that we have seats at the table for all of those perspectives and that we're hearing with an open heart and an open mind. Gone are the days of government going into communities and saying, this is what we're going to do, right? And it's a shift. It really is a shift for us. And I think that that's really, as we're looking at those daunting issues that we need to address, in order for them to be successful, we have to be there and be present with that open mind and heart. And to invite in those perspectives as we're formulating the how. So we might have the data, but we have to sit down with those impacted community members and say, how do we address this issue in your community? And recognizing that from community to community, it can be different. And I think for the center as well, is you can play a very pivotal role in that. A lot of what we're going to be facing, frankly, at the end of the day, is going to take collaboration across jurisdictional boundaries. When we talk about climate change, it's not just unique to the unincorporated communities of the county. And when we talk about transportation or the housing crisis here within the region, it's not going to be solved within one city. It's a regional issue. And how do we come together to partner for that greater good? To, as you mentioned, to have that common agenda, to come together and recognize that we all need to roll up our sleeves. And then frankly, how do we bring the funding in to solve those issues? Because we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. It's going to take more than what governmental entities have within our budgets to be able to solve these issues. And so for me, I think as we look at whether it's the data evaluation office here within the county or really looking at the center, it's how do we bring those discussions together in that environment when everyone can speak honestly about what the problems are and what the solutions can be, but then more importantly, to ensure that it actually works for the community, that they, as the community, see what we want to achieve as success for them. And the center, I know I am relying on the center to help us with a lot of those aspects as we move forward.
We are on it and we are excited about it. One of the things that I think is so compelling about this conversation is that there's a real sense of not letting this inflection point that we're at go to waste. It would be a failure of imagination to go back to a normal that didn't serve so many people well. So, Nick, I love the fact that the Promotora model and what you've been able to do on the direct outreach side on COVID information and vaccination has informed your other programs. And Sarah, I think this is such an important translation to all of the bigger issues, including climate change. When we talk about federal resources and other monies and really bringing in partnerships, one of the things that I think doesn't get talked about very much is that within every crisis are a set of opportunities. And so there are ways in which we actually could do things more cost effectively or find different ways of doing things than we've always done them. And so a big part of that is investing in the relationships, investing in the ecosystem to identify those things and be able to think bigger. Mark, you described this proposal that we put together, this coastal blue-green hub, which was connecting fishermen to ports up and down the coast. And and really laying the groundwork for building long-term coastal resilience and protecting our tourism economy, creating new recreation for public health. That requires real backbone support. The conversations that we were having depended on everything, Nick, Sarah, that you just said, right? All these lay the groundwork relationships. And Mark, I see this very much, this final building block of collective impact as the core work of the foundation, these fundamental investments in the region and the community. Can you speak a little bit to how the foundation works on these issues?
Sure. We have.
You're all good.
Too many buttons to touch at one time. Forgive me. I shouldn't be in charge of any technology. We really have a shared vision and lay out our plans to help achieve our goals. But this is all for naught if we don't have a strong and diverse ecosystem of nonprofits and community organizations to mobilize when there's a time of great need or crisis. The foundation has invested in building up our regional backbone and filling gaps in capacity and critical services for our entire region. And I'll share one recent example of what we've done. The San Diego Foundation announced last month that we awarded a $500,000 grant to the Central San Diego Black Chamber of Commerce to start the Urban Business Resource Center. Our investment was part of a total need and opportunity of $1 million that's been raised to support the center and the economic equity for Black entrepreneurs in San Diego. This is the kind of backbone support that's essential to make sure that our region endures through times of crisis and ensures that everyone thrives in the good times. You've heard from Jamal of how the Policy and Innovation Center is already working to enhance the region's data and analytical capacities in collaboration with the county, SANDAG, and other partners. This kind of core investment in people, data, and creative problem solving is exactly the kind of basic groundwork that can help our whole region look at our long-standing problems differently to identify new, more equitable solutions.
Fantastic. We've talked about a huge range of things, these 5 big building blocks, right? Having a common agenda, really measuring the right things and making sure what we measure matters, communicating effectively, making sure that we are supporting laying the groundwork for long-term engagement and not expecting folks to just suddenly rise up in moments of crisis to solve problems together and to solve them well. Before I jump to a set of final questions, I'm going to encourage the audience, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. This is a long-term conversation for the Policy and Innovation Center, with the county, with our partners. And we understand that so much of what we do depends on all the good work that the Live Well community is doing on the ground. And so please do send your questions our way if we don't get to them in this last 10 minutes. You have my commitment that this is a multi-year conversation that we will be in on how to do this well and make progress on the ground. So with that, I'm going to wrap with a single question for all of our panelists, which is, there really have been so many great examples in this conversation. In just an hour, we've jumped around on topics that range from, health and food security all the way out to coastal resilience. And everything really is connected, but we really have a broad and diverse audience with us today. And many folks are working on small pieces of these different sprawling problems. If you had a call to action for this audience and this group of folks who are doing such good work, what would it be for the people who are listening to us today? Mark, I'll start with you and then pass it back around.
Sure. Thanks, Shalini. It was wonderful to hear from Nick, Sarah, and Jamal, and I'm personally so excited about the opportunities that lay ahead. I've spoken often about how the San Diego Foundation has sought out partnerships. I think the Live Well San Diego vision is a model for engagement and would encourage all of you in the audience to follow our work at the foundation and the Policy and Innovation Center to learn about where you can engage in specific projects and dialogues about the future of our region.
Fantastic. Jamal.
Yeah, simply put, I would say, please go to our website, sdrpic.org, sdrpic.org, and please sign up for our mailing list to receive updates and information and opportunities to engage. And I want to be clear, this is not something that will be unidirectional communication, as in us just kind of sending our newsletter to the audience. Rather, it is going to be really something that we're looking at kind of embodying this continuous communication. And from that, for example, sending out potentially surveys that can help understand, what's important to our community, what's important to you folks on the call, and then using that data to really kind of inform the projects and the processes that we're going to be leveraging when we're making key decisions and how to engage with the community more broadly.
Credit to Jamal. We really do want to hear from you all and hear from you in ways that we are able to use the information you provide. So we want to use your time well, and we want to be able to use our collective impact to serve all of you. So that was a great set of comments. Sarah, your call to action, please.
I echo everything that Jamal said as far as the engagement for us to know what are the areas of passion and work for purposes of those who are participating with us today. And then the other thing that I would say is that the future is so bright for us as a region. I feel it, I know it, and it's going to take every single person who's part of this conversation and for us to engage in really meaningful dialogue to move to those positive outcomes. So looking forward to working with everyone.
I could not agree more about the opportunities ahead. As much as we are emerging from still a crisis, I really do think that we are on the cusp of being able to make transformational changes to build a sturdier and more equitable set of opportunities for the region and for everyone here. And so, Nick, I want to give you the last word before I wrap.
The beauty of the Live Well San Diego vision, now approaching its 12th year and growing, is that it's about all of us. It is one of the most inclusive, all boats rise targeted universalism that I've seen in our region, because it's truly after improving the life expectancy and quality of life of all San Diegans. And whether you're in health, whether you're in safety, whether you're passionate about the natural or built environment or dealing in poverty, everyone has a seat at the table. So it's up to us. And everyone is a leader. And so the call to action is, like when we started, there was, it started with one partner that joined. Over 500 partners today. The potential for this to continue to grow is immense. Everyone is a leader. Everyone's a visionary leader. And remember this, visionary leaders see what everyone else is seeing, but doing what no one else is doing, sometimes at the cost of mockery by the present for the betterment of the future. So we're all going through sometimes mockery lane as we continued to have this grand vision of, yes, having all San Diegans live well. But that means all of us bringing others together as we lead in this work of passion and purpose and helping San Diegans live well.
That's a fantastic way to wrap this discussion. I want to thank everybody in the audience for being here for these 2 days of conversations and events that embody everything that we, I think, tried to highlight in this last panel. What I will say for the Policy and Innovation Center is that we are really focused on problem solving, and problem solving is about collective engagement around problems and solutions. And so we do see ourselves in many ways as the glue to pull together some of these big issues, to be able to ask questions slightly differently than may have been asked before and reveal new resources and opportunities. So we are very focused on the moment that we are in now as a country. For folks who have not been following conversations in Washington, D.C., earlier this week, there was the biggest infrastructure bill signed since President Roosevelt. We have a once in a generation chance to completely shift the trajectory for so many people in our region. And that will depend on everyone in this 500 organization network doing your part, being visionary from where you sit and the perch from which you can see the problems and the solutions that are important for our region. And so I want to tie this all together with an enormous thanks to our panel, to the audience, and to all of you for all of your work, because we really can go far together. And doing so means having conversations exactly like this one. So there are three folks in the room that I want to thank specifically: Gabe Gutierrez, Carrie Richtelli, and Shelley, I'm not going to pronounce your name properly, Trigambo. I apologize. I have one of those names where it feels worse when you get someone else's wrong. But Gabe, Carrie, Shelley, thank you for pulling us all together, for enabling this conversation. And most of all, thank you to the Live Well community for having us and for the work you do. We are grateful to be here and excited to continue the conversation on collective impact and to make sure it translates into action. Thanks very much.